Can somebody please read number 6 for me? Over x. Okay, and the directions say, shh, guys, come on. And the directions say graph, right? Okay. So, first of all, does everybody recognize that this is a rational expression? Okay. What makes a function a rational expression is that you have a variable in the denominator. All right. So, do we have a variable in the? Wow, I cannot speak. I'm speaking too fast. Slow it down. Do we have a variable in the denominator here? Yeah, but remember, for rational expressions, we have two types, right? We have a over x minus h, and then we have ax plus b over cx plus b, right? So the main thing here is, where's the variable? Top and bottom, or just bottom? Just bottom. So that means that it's our regular setup here. So we're going to start off by finding our vertical asymptote, and then we need to find our horizontal asymptote. So who remembers, how do we find a vertical asymptote? What do we do? No. Good try, though. So, anybody remember, what do we do when we find a vertical asymptote? And this is going to be a problem. You need to get this in the gray matter, okay? Vertical asymptotes are found by setting the denominator equal to 0. Always, regardless of what type of rational expression you're graphing. If anybody ever asks you to find the vertical asymptote, that's what you do. Alright, so I'm going to take my denominator, set it equal to 0, get x by itself. Is x by itself? So my vertical asymptote is going to be at x equals 0. Is everybody okay with that? Yes or no? Alright, okay. The horizontal asymptote is going to be a y, right? Because it's horizontal, so it's got to be a y equals. Horizontal asymptotes are determined by the k, which is the number added or subtracted outside the fraction when we're in this format. So, what number is being added or subtracted outside? 0, because there's nothing there. So, is everybody okay with their vertical and horizontal asymptotes so far? Okay. When we make our chart, what goes in the middle? What value do I always put in the middle of my chart? Well, this time it's 0, but why? Right, it's the h or the vertical asymptote, right? So wherever you get your x equals, whatever that value is, goes in the middle. What should I get when I type it into my calculator to evaluate? You should get a does not exist or a domain error is what your calculator should spit out. So you go 2 above, 2 below, right? So now we plug them in. Okay, so negative 1 goes into the x. Negative 0.5 divided by negative 1 is just going to be a positive 0.5. Plugging in negative 2, right? Negative 0.5 divided by 2 is going to be positive 1/4. 0.25, I do believe. 1/2 divided by 2, 1/2 times 1/2, yeah. Everybody good? Plugging in a positive 1, negative 0.5 divided by 1 is negative 0.5. Negative 0.5 divided by 2 is going to be negative 0.25. So the first thing that I want you to realize real quick here is what is the a value for this problem? The a is the number on top, right? So it's negative 0.5. So is that a positive or a negative? Negative. So instead of our graph being in the first and the third quadrant, where should it be? Second and the fourth. Okay, whenever a is positive, it flips from 1 and 3 to 2 and 4. Everybody right with that? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, why is that important? If you decide to retake the ACT, and they ask you to graph a rational expression, okay? If you look up here and you see just a number on top and it's positive, you instantly know your graph has to be in the first and third quadrant in relation to the asymptotes. So that means that something that's written in here, you can instantly throw out. So even if you have to guess, you can make an educated guess instead of just a guess. Increase your probability of guessing the right answer. Everybody over that? Yes, no? Okay. So over here, we're ready to finally graph. So let me set up for it. Okay. When we graph asymptotes, what kind of a line do we use? Dotted. And I'm going to have both a vertical and a horizontal asymptote here. So let me get done with my scales. And let me get to the dotted lines. So we're going to have a vertical asymptote. We're going to have a horizontal asymptote. And then all I do is plot my points. All right, so negative 2 I'm at 0.25. At negative 1, I'm at a half. At 1, I'm at negative half. At 2, I'm at negative 0.25. So if you notice, my graph is in quadrants 2 and 4 created by the asymptote, which I expected because A is negative. Everybody all right with that? And now I just connect my dots because I know what my shape is going to look like. So I start next to the asymptote here, come down, curl through the dots, extend out forever, start down at negative y, curl through my points, and that's it, you're done. Okay, so the vertical asymptote, what you do is you take your denominator and set it equal to 0, and then isolate the variable. So this one, I took my denominator of x, set it equal to 0, it's isolated, so there's nothing else to do, that's just your asymptote. And then for the horizontal asymptote, it's always the number added or subtracted outside, it's your k. There's nothing here, so it's a 0. Alright? Okay, so what does number 14 say? Please and thank you. X what? Just like, and that's it? Nothing else said? So, we start off in the same spot. Vertical asymptote first. Horizontal asymptote. Okay, again, how do I find a vertical asymptote? It is negative 2. How did you get it? Okay, so the denominator equal to 0, x equals a negative 2. And there's your vertical asymptote, right? Horizontal asymptote is the number added or subtracted outside because we have no variable on top. So it's just 0. Everybody okay with that? Yes or no? Okay, I'm not planning on graphing this one because I think you all should be able to handle it. Gazoon tight. So there you go, right? Same thing as normal. If you plug in a negative 2, what's negative 2 plus 2? 0. Can we divide by 0? No, that's what creates the does not exist. Plug in the negative 3. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1 divided by 1 is negative 1. Negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2 divided by 1 is negative 1 half. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1, so that's 1, and that's 1 half. Okay, again, is our A positive or negative here? Positive, right? So I should expect to be in quadrants 1 and 3 when I graph. And when you graph, you will in fact be in 1 and 3 if you use those numbers. Alright? Everybody okay with making the chart, identifying vertical asymptote, horizontal asymptote? So let's get on to 27 and hopefully something that's a little bit bigger. What's 27 say?
Y equals x plus 4 over x
Minus 3. Okay, so this one isn't quite as big as I hope, but it is the other format, right? So for this one, we're going to start off in the same place, vertical asymptote, horizontal asymptote. But what do you recognize about our variable? Where is it? Top, bottom, or both? Both. So that means that we have to use the alternative method, right? All the alternative method impacts is our horizontal asymptotes. Vertical asymptotes are always found the same regardless of what you're graphing. So, how do I find a vertical asymptote? Set the denominator equal to 0, correct? So what's x equal to?
3.
So that becomes your vertical asymptote. Alright? In this format, who remembers, how do I find out my horizontal asymptote? Because there's no k out here, right? But this style doesn't have a k. How do I find my horizontal asymptote? Anybody remember? It's the coefficient on x from the top divided by the coefficient on x from the bottom. So you're just looking at the coefficients. We call it a over c, right? Because this format is called ax plus b over cx plus d. So what's the lead coefficient on the numerator? 1, and what's the lead coefficient on x in the denominator? So what's 1 divided by 1? So there's your horizontal asymptote. Everybody all right with that style? Yes, no, maybe? All right. So same thing as always from here. Vertical asymptote in the middle to above, to below. Does not exist in the middle. Plug them in. 4 plus 4 on top is 8. 4 minus 3 is 1. That's 4. Whoa, that's 8. 5 plus 4 is 9 on top. 5 minus 3 is 2. So you wind up with 9 over 2. 2, that's going to be 6 and negative 1, so that's a negative 6. And 1, that's going to be 5 and negative 2, so negative 5 over 2. Everybody good? And you might want to use decimals on those if you want to. Go right ahead. Anybody have any questions on how to set this up? Okay. So, back to what Kyle asked earlier, I'm just going to make this one up. And we're just going to go through the basics, but if you can handle this, then you can handle anything I'm going to throw at you. All right? So, first of all, does everybody recognize that this is a rational expression? Okay, it's a rational equation. Y, variable in the denominator. Okay? So, this is going to be the form where it's an A over. So, we're going to start it off the exact same way, vertical asymptote first, and then horizontal asymptote. And these are x equals, and these are y equals. How do we find a vertical asymptote? What's our first step always to be? Chris? Yeah, okay. Set the denominator equal to 0. So how do we get x by itself from here? Add 4, and then, so what's my answer? 2. Everybody good with that? Okay, horizontal asymptote. In this format, where does the horizontal asymptote come from? K, the number outside, right? What's my number outside? 3, so that's my horizontal. Always put the vertical asymptote in the middle. Does not, what? DNA. Whoops, wrong class. 2 above, 2 below, right? Plug them in. 8 minus 4 is 4. That's 3/4 plus 3, so 3 3/4. 3, 6, 2, 1 1/2. So that's 4 1/2. 1, 2, negative 2, negative 1 1/2. So that's 1 1/2. Negative 3/4, 3, 2.25. Everybody over that? Yes or no? So this should be 3.75 actually, since everything else is in decimal form. And then you would just graph it from there, now that we have our pieces. All right, the main thing here is getting the vertical and horizontal asymptotes proper, because if you mess up on the vertical asymptote here, you're going to put your chart in the wrong place, because what you guys wind up doing, because you expect this middle to be it does not exist, you tend to stop checking it, right? So a good way to make sure that you're typing these in properly with parentheses is run the value that should get you a number that doesn't exist. All right, your calculator will either spit out domain error or cannot divide by 0, something along those lines. If you do not get that for this middle number, either the number's wrong or you typed it in wrong. Either way, you need to see me or ask a neighbor and get it figured out. Okay? But if you mess up on the first step here with the vertical asymptote and the horizontal asymptote, the chart will be wrong, and then your entire graph is going to be wrong.